right, hello and welcome to Technically Speaking and this week's special episode on fire and smoke restoration. I'm excited to kick off this week's topic, especially as we bring in a special guest this week to talk about this topic. As many of you know, my name is Brandon Burton, and I will be your host today for Technically Speaking, but I'm going to play a little bit of a different role in today's Technically Speaking episode than I normally do, and really serve more as the interviewer as we go through an interview on this topic. So to kind of get us kicked off and get us started, let me run through just a couple of quick housekeeping items as we normally do. First, remember that the Q&A is how we're going to interact with you at the end of the session today, not through the chat, so that you're likely not even seeing the chat feature in Zoom. So you might want to take a moment right now, just find that Q&A tool. It should be in a menu bar, either at the top or the bottom of your screen, and open up that Q&A menu so you have that available to you. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions on the topic of fire and smoke today, and we're going to hear lots of great answers, but I may not ask all the questions that you'd like to have asked. So make sure that if you have a question either on the topics we're addressing or really anything else related to property restoration, throw those questions into the Q&A and we will make sure that we address those at the end of the session today. So with that, let's go ahead and get rolling and jump right into this week's episode of Technically Speaking. First, I want to start things off by introducing our special guest today. I really admire a lot of folks in our industry that have a passion for what we do. I learned a long time ago that it's a difficult balance to strike between being very humble in the work that we do and also being very confident and really filling the shoes of what I feel are strong leaders in our industry. And in the area of fire and smoke, I've got a lot of folks that I look to as experts. Some of them are names that I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about today, but in particular, one that I've come to really love and appreciate here over the course of the last several years is a gentleman that's going to spend some time with us today, and that is Mr. John Pletcher. He's the owner of Restore Tech Incorporated and has also volunteered his time over the course of the last several years as the vice chair of the currently draft S700 Standard for professional restoration of fire and smoke damaged structures. So I want to thank John and thank you for joining us today, John, and giving your time to our listeners here at Technically Speaking. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. I'm very humbled to be asked to do this. Excited to do it too.
Wonderful. Thanks for being with us. We're going to spend, like I said, most of our time today really zeroing in on fire and smoke in this interview today. And talking about the industry at large, kind of talking about some of the drivers behind the industry, and then get into the technical, as we always do here at Technically Speaking, and talk a little bit about what some of the keys are in the process and how we can hone our skills and get better at those keys. So with that, let's just go ahead and roll right into it and get started. Let's talk first a little bit, John, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to our guests. Just talk a little bit about kind of your upbringing in the industry and kind of where you came from and kind of your history with fire and smoke restoration.
Well, thanks, Brandon. If you weren't an IICRC standards committee member or you weren't part of the RIA association, you probably wouldn't know who I am. I'm kind of a behind the scenes guy, and but I started in, I'm going to say 1983 or 1984. I was working for a service master business in the Washington, D.C. area. And they were a very large service master, and we did a lot of business. And, I wasn't so much about, back then they wanted you to, service master's model was that you did a third of your business was be residential cleaning, a third of your business was be commercial, like carpet cleaning, and then a third of your business would be disaster restoration. Well, that was the only thing that really appealed to me. So I found a franchise that really did a lot of DR and went to work for them for 6 years in the Washington area. So our market was large and we had a big portion of the business. In 1990, I decided I wanted to, work on my own, be an entrepreneur, and I bought a franchise from Service Master back, and then I was Service Master of Great Falls for 10 years. Worked in the same area basically, but I really all I wanted to do was fire work and water work. We always kind of put the two together, water and fire, but I think fire really appealed to me because there's a little bit of science in water and fire, and a lot of skills that you don't see people using when they're going out to just get carpets dry and things like that. So in 2000, I decided I no longer want it to be a franchise, and that's a whole other story. But I decided to become an independent, and so I coined the term Restore Tech, and we've been doing it since 2000. This is 2003, so this has almost come to 40 years. I've almost been in this business, so it's been a long time. Couple of things happened to me that I would want to point out that were kind of advantageous to me back in those days. And I don't know how many of the people in the audience remember those days. And I mean the days before cell phones and laptop computers. And I mean, we're talking pagers. We're talking. I mean, when the fax machine was invented, that was like a huge thing. There was no Xactimate. So when we were out doing disaster restoration, the insurance companies really wanted they needed us, and we needed them. It was a mutual respect thing, and they couldn't close a claim without somebody there that could do the service for the amount of money that were being paid and charged for that service. So I got my foot in the door at USAA. They had a regional office here in Reston, Virginia, and back in those days, the personal relationships were accepted. You could take them to lunch, you could go golfing. I got to know all the people in that office. There was probably 40 to 50 property people in that office. And I'd go over there for lunch, and heck, sometimes they'd invite me to happy hour. So I'm not saying they'd buy, but we did go out and have a good time and get to know those folks. And I miss those times. They were exactly what they were, the good old days. So, my business over the years was built on USA work, and I don't know everybody out there doing USA work, but they're insure the military and families and those kind of things, and they're a really fine class of people. They're easy to work with, but that was one thing. The other thing, and this was all before where we are at today, which is with third-party administrators, insurance companies, exercising a little bit more control over what we do. More on that later, but I would say that. The other thing I wanted that perhaps was even bigger for me was my relationship with Marty King. And I want to kind of segue into the next question, talking about Marty a little bit, but I would not be here talking with you, with Brandon today, if it were not for Marty King.
Well, that is a perfect segue, because the next thing I wanted to throw over your way, John, was exactly that. So just, if you could talk a little bit about who you feel are really the industry experts that you've interacted with over the years, and kind of the impact they've had on you.
Thanks. Yes, and I think that I would be curious how many people that are listening to this webinar or watching it know who Marty King's his name is Martin L. King, and it's not Luther, it's Lloyd, and he's Lionel. I'm sorry, Lionel, and he truly was a game changer for me. I met him in 1994, I think it was, and it actually changed my life, and I'll tell you why. He was well, even if you don't know the name, you probably know someone who trained you in the restoration industry, was probably trained by him or by perhaps another really important person. To me, it was Cliff Zlotnick, Unsmoke Industries. Cliff has done a lot in this industry over the years in training people. We always kind of banter back and forth about who had more exposure to the restores, and Cliff's training was more hands-on, and Marty's was more classroom, but both of them deserve a lot of credit. And I think we all owe both of those guys a great deal of gratitude for where we are today with the technology that the industry has, and the methodologies that we know about, and how we've learned about how smoke behaves in buildings and those kinds of things. So I want to tell you a little bit about 1994. Okay, Marty had been around a while before then, but I was just a service master guy, right? And so I was doing some work for Chubb, and the adjuster calls me up that I'd done a lot of work for, and she says, I have this problem, this persistent smoke odor in this house in Washington, D.C., and I've found this expert who's going to come and assess the damage, see if we can figure out where the odor's coming from, because the contractor, the company that did the repairs, can't figure it out. And I want you to come there and watch what's going on. And then when he tells you how to fix this, I want your company to fix it. I said, oh, great, wonderful. Because I had no idea such a person existed. So when I got there and watched him work, I mean, he was impeccably dressed, full suit, tie, carried a briefcase, had a hat on, and just watching the way he carried himself and entered the room and asked the perfect questions and listened. That's the one thing that I could take away from my first meeting with Marty, is how good a listener he was. Because afterwards and later on in life, he would often tell me, look, it's not what I smell or you smell, it's what the customer smells. And you have to kind of take that seriously. And that's really was a big learning point for me. I don't make this a long conversation, but we started to spend more time together after that and hanging out. And he would call me when he had a problem that he need some help on, and I would call him when I had a problem. I called him all the time, and it wasn't just fire and smoke, Brandon. It was tear gas, skunk odor, fuel oil spills. He knew something about everything. It was just amazing, the breadth of his knowledge. And I don't want to get too off track and just spend the whole hour talking about Marty, but there's really not enough to say about. He truly was a founding father for our industry. In fact, he came to ASCR in 1971 and stayed with it until around 2011 or 2012 when he resigned. But when he passed away in 2015, and I'll close with this, they asked the people that knew him to write a tribute to the CNR magazine that he used to write for. He wrote an article a month for 20 years, 200 plus articles on the restoration. And Cliff summed it up the best. He said he had the shortest and he had the best answer. And he said, igniter of an industry, those 4 words. And that's exactly what he was.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, I had a little bit of exposure to Marty, much more so to Cliff, and both definitely left a very, very long-lasting mark with me as well.
Yeah.
It is amazing that our industry is built upon just this history of learning and knowledge and dedication, and what I always hang it on, John, is passion. People that had passion for an industry, and that passion carries forward to where we are and what we do today. And without that passion, we wouldn't be where we are. The passion.
No, and I think I gleaned that passion from him. I got one more thing I want to say about it, Brandon. I think that one of the things that when I realized when I met him for the first time, the first thing I thought was, I have got to know this man better. I have to learn as much as I possibly can, which drove me to join the ASCR at the time, the RIA, so I can get the monthly magazines and read his publications. He was a prolific writer. He wrote what we use for the 700, the knitter guidelines. I don't know if I can see this. Is my dog-eared version of it. They have nice clean versions of it. This was the de facto standard for 25 plus years, even though it wasn't published by an ANSI or a accredited standard publisher. People looked at that guideline as the gospel, and it's really, really good stuff. You can still buy one today. RIA sells them.
So let's take that, John, and kind of move that into the next phase of this. So obviously there are a lot of drivers that have affected the fire restoration industry and kind of caused it to be where it is today. Outside of kind of the experts that have really been a foundation for us, kind of walk through some of the other things you think are the major drivers that have moved us towards the point we are today and have driven that maturity in the fire restoration market.
Well, I really believe it's the 2 main organizations that we have in our industry. We have the IICRC, which is a certification and training organization. They sell standards, of course. And then we have the Restoration Industry Association, which is how I got involved with IICRC. The Restoration Industry Association was Marty's. I fully give him the credit for taking to where it is today. Offers really high level certification training. He used to teach a course called the Certified Restorers course. And this was a huge driver. This is a manual. I mean, you had to take the study manual. I mean, you had to qualify for this course. You had to take a bunch of IICRC prerequisite courses to get invited to participate. It was a week-long, grueling classroom setting, and you had to stay up and study at night, or you would not have passed the test, which took all day on Saturday. But I think there's about 700 certified restorers, and as far as I'm aware, they have them in Australia as well, in the UK as well as America.
I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. I think that one of the key things in fire restoration and water damage restoration, obviously, is the education and the training. And obviously, I've spent a lot of my life aligned around the IICRC, and that training is very, very critical. but a lot of folks overlook the designations that are available through the RIA. And I think those are a really critical thing. If you're not aware of those designations and you really want to drive yourself forward, I think the CR, the WLS, these designations that are available through, actually now even in a partnership with IICRC and RIA are definitely something that needs to be on your career map.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too. I wanted to, I'm not sure where we're going to get to this point of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the 700, but the other thing that I kind of wanted to say was that well, let's move on. There's 2 points on this. There's part P of this. These are the good things, and there's some things that aren't so good.
Got it. Yeah. So let's drive forward, John. I think we have a question that'll bring that back out here in a little bit. So, so kind of next up on the industry drivers, what do you think is out in the future that's going to impact the industry? So we've talked a little bit about what's driven it to get to where it is today. What do you think is coming next? What can restorers expect to impact their business in the future?
This is one of the questions I was kind of a little bit concerned about answering, Brandon. I'll be serious, because actually the truth of the matter is, I really can't say, but the thought of this question kind of scares me to death. I really don't know. I think that the industry is kind of in a little bit of a stalemate right now. We're having to deal with other influence that has taken abdicated some of the authority away from restorers to make decisions, to make assessments, and I have some strong opinions about that, but I can't answer that, because I got it. We need to unify. The industry needs to unify somehow. I've always said that, and Marty always said this, and Mark Springer is leading this now at RIA, this AGA group, this advocacy for governmental affairs. We need a singular voice, maybe even one that can go to Capitol Hill and do some lobbying for our industry, because we are at the mercy of the insurance companies. It's the golden rule. The man with all the gold makes all the rules, but that's because we don't really have a voice. And I mean, they are doing some amazing things at RIA. I'm not here to sell memberships to RIA, trust me. I'm just saying those are drivers that are happening. And got it. And if we get behind them, there's always somebody out there that I don't care what they're doing. They're selling their service for far. They're charging more than their service they're providing. And then there's the other guy that's probably doing better work and selling it for less. Because why? Because he's being restricted on how much he can charge.
So let's use that as a launching point into getting into some of the more technical aspects. So the first area I want to take a pause here is just talking about standards. You mentioned that just a little bit ago, John. Let me talk a little bit just for a moment about standards at large, and then I want to kind of hand over to you to talk a little bit about the S700 and standards specifically. But as many of you hopefully are very, very well aware, our industry has made a very large commitment to not just standards, not just processes that help us kind of align as an industry around the process of what we do, but also through the methodology of developing those standards through ANSI. I've spent a lot of my time the last several years just getting much more acquainted with just what that means and what that accreditation means. But what I've been impressed with most, and something I'm going to ask you a little bit about here in a second, John, is just how the industry has begun to step behind these standards and really cooperate in the development of these standards, especially with where we're headed with the S700 that is currently in draft, because of some of the things that you just mentioned, just how important that alignment is as an industry. Having said that, I think the industry has a lot more that they can do to stand behind that process and get engaged and involved in that process. So we'll kind of explore that here a bit with a couple of quick questions and then get even deeper into the technical. So we're going to kind of take the technical path one step at a time here. So first, let me throw this at you. You've had a chance to kind of experience technical writing projects, as you'd mentioned, kind of in your history with industry. Just briefly, how has the process with the S700 been different in that ANSI IICRC process?
Well, you have to remember, we started fire standard number 1, which was started by Marty King back in 2012, I believe it was, 2011, 2012. And then when FS2 came along, the fire standard number 2, which was the removal of combustion particles, FS1 was the identification of combustion particles. So when at RIA, there was nothing but restorers on the consensus body. We didn't have users, producers. We're all producers. We didn't have users or general interest people. So, and we also didn't have a lot of management support. They were kind of between management companies, and we often had to do the stuff that gets done for us by ANSI and IICRC on our own, like the taking the minutes and the voting and writing down the who was there, what we did. We had a go-to meeting, but it was nothing like what we have at IICRC. And I have to say that the leadership team and the support group at IICRC is outstanding. I mean, starting with yourself, of course, and Darren Foote is the vice chair. You're the chair, and then I can't say enough nice things about Millie Washington. She's just amazing. And then Cheryl Smith, all tremendous people. We've had nothing like this at RIA. So it's a completely different process. There's so much more scrutiny. The way the words have to be used, the shoulds, the shalls, the mays, the cans. I know more about mays and cans thanks to Brandon. In recommends and stuff like that. At RIA, shall was the trigger word. It wasn't should. So it's a whole different process. It's comparing apples to watermelons.
So kind of using that as a launching point into where we're going next. So just kind of understanding the process that gets into that. Just talk a little bit about how critical you think that cooperation in industry has been behind the 700. There's some history there, and I think it's important for the industry to kind of recognize where that's coming from.
Yeah, okay. I've always looked at the IIC, because it's not a membership organization. You're not a dues paying member. It's kind of a fee based kind of thing. Of course, I'm a certified firm and I have certifications, and my employees all have certifications, but there was a distinct bridge that was not there between the IIC and the IRA. And I don't know what really Pete Kinsaley, our friend, could tell you this. I'm sure how the relationship was, but it wasn't strong. And then we were writing FS2, and FS1 was just sitting there on a shelf. And right about 2017, we finished FS2 and we voted to approve it, but we lost our standards publisher. They were going to have it published through ASHRAE, not ANSI, because the IRCRC pretty much had the ANSI pins, and that I don't want to get too technical and lose the whole audience here with that stuff. But we had a completed standard that was done, and IICRC was just getting ready to start their standards process. And what happened was, I think some of the folks at RIA, Mark Springer and Lee King, said, look, we've got a product. We could go to IICRC and see if we can do something here together. So those two guys worked with the leadership at IICRC. I can't remember the names of the people. You probably know them, but and they said, why can't we become a strategic partner? And this was huge. I think for the first time ever in our industry, these two organizations are now linked together, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that just to drive home the importance of that for the audience and why it's important, I think, for us to talk about that for a moment. Our industry, these standards are critical to our industry. I think we all understand, the role that the S500 has played now for a long time in our industry, and really unifying around process. And I don't know if the industry really recognizes just what the 700 now for fire and smoke is going to bring. It's going to serve at exactly that same level, if not at that level, then higher. And I think part of the reason for that is because of just how unified the industry has been behind it. I've just my history in the industry and looking at the time I've served with ASDR and RIA and the IICRC, to see those two organizations come together and align on something like this is huge. It's massive.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to have a very, very positive impact on our industry. But it's also at the same time, the reason I wanted to go through in general, go through standards as an intro before we got to the technical end, is I also have kind of a call to action to everybody. I think it's really important, as you kind of highlighted, John, that as an industry, we've got to participate in these processes. And the biggest way to do that is to ensure you're reviewing these drafts when they are drafted. You're providing comments back to these consensus bodies, or deciding that you want to commit the hundreds of hours that it takes to commit to being a part of these consensus bodies that do the work. Really get engaged and get involved, because think about what the S500 is meant to water. The S700 is going to do the same thing for fire, and we got to own it. It's our document, so we've got to own it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and transfer us over to the technical end now. Let's get a little bit deeper into the technical side of fire mitigation and fire and smoke restoration. And to kind of set this off, I just want to talk a little bit about just restoration as an industry for a moment before I throw a couple of technical questions over to John. First is just recognizing, that there are some similarities in the world of restoration, right? There are some things that are very similar, and there are some things that are obviously very different depending on the type of damage that we're dealing with, the type of restoration. The first is that every project is highly, highly unique, right? I think this is what really drives the interest that a lot of us have in this space and in this industry, is that no 2 days in the office are the same, right? It's always going to be a bit different, especially if you're in the field and you're walking into these projects. It always begins with that inspection, and finding out what is this job's character, what is this job's personality, and how is this different than the last problem that we were able to solve, for our last client. And therefore, the principles are also going to be a bit different, right, depending on the type of damage that we're dealing with. But the core of those principles is that we always approach every restoration project by gathering the information, making our hypothesis, right, technical term for an educated guess, on how this project needs to proceed, then deploying that and evaluating against it. And I think one of the things that's absolutely uber critical about restoration is that you've got to take every job with a measure of humility, right? A measure of humility. You make a hypothesis, you make a best educated guess, you deploy that guess. It may work, it may not work. And if it doesn't work, we got to be willing to admit that it's not working and adjust, right? And I think restoration is this constant cycle of doing exactly that, of gathering information, making a hypothesis, deploying, evaluating what you expect and what you're really seeing, and determining why your expectations from reality are different and making adjustments to compensate. So kind of setting that stage as kind of the high level principles of restoration at large. Let's zero in on fire and smoke specifically. And what I want to ask you first, John, here on the technical side of things, is what do you think are the most vital elements or keys in the fire and smoke restoration process?
Okay, these are great questions, Brandon. I think that one of the things I want to tell the listeners and viewers is that when the standard gets published, we spent a lot of time working on an informative and educational part for it wasn't going to be standard writing, so it could not be included in the standard. It was not standard of care, and I'm sure you've gone over this with your audience. We thought we needed to give the person who's going to read this standard a little bit of background on the technical side of what's going on. So it's called restoration theory, and it really talks about all the science. Like you said, every situation is unique. Every type of residue depends on what the fuel was burning, how hot it got, how much available oxygen was there. And then we talk about the forces and factors that determine the distribution of smoke in a building. Where does it go? How does it get from one floor to the next? How does it get from one room to another? What do the deposit patterns look like? What are smoke webs? What are nail pops? What is ghosting and things like that? I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but I think this is going to be the first standard that has color photographs in it. Is that true?
Yeah, it actually will. Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be really helpful because you can talk all day long. I can sit here and try to explain what wet smoke looks like to you, but until you see a picture of it, you're not going to get it. And a lot of people really don't know what wet smoke is. And I think that we couldn't use the standard to say, well, if the store should know what this looks like, and they do, but they may not know exactly how it happens. How does it get that way? How does the smoke get that way? How does it deposit in that fashion? So I think that's going to be a critical. In fact, in the beginning, in the foreword, we're going to talk about asking the reader of the standard to read the restoration theory first before they read the document, because it's going to help them understand the principles that we're talking about that reasonably prudent restorers should be doing. But getting back to your question here, I think, I know this program is called Technically Speaking, but there's a psychological part of this too that's really important. You mentioned humility. I think it's more than that. I mean, it's you have to be genuine. You have to be empathetic. You have to be sincere, but not over the top. I mean, you don't want to cry with them. You got some people here that have had a terrible thing happen to them, and it's a very chaotic situation. You're there to kind of be the calming source, the person that's going to show them there's some hope here, and maybe you can even say, we can get through this together. It's going to, you have to be confident, like you said, self-assured, but not pushy. And most importantly, you have to be, and Marty was a big proponent of this, you have to be 100% impartial. What you assess, what you see can't be influenced by anyone else. And you have to be ethical. What is the right thing to do here? I mean, that's all that comes into the assessment phase.
Mhm.
Did that answer that? I think,
It does. So kind of in summary, some of the most vital keys are first, just the quality of that assessment, right? And understanding, what is unique about this project. Another key area of fire mitigation, I would extend this to any property restoration, is that empathy. Ensuring that we understand the client view, the client perspective, and empathizing with that client view and client perspective, especially with a fire. And I think that you calling that out with fire is particular, just because of how devastating that can be as an experience for a property owner. What I often say, John, is this is the place where people live and breathe and raise their children, store every worldly belonging that has any importance, and you feel that this is your safe zone, right? As a homeowner in particular, especially residentially, this is your safe zone where you go to get away from all of the unpredictable stresses in life. And all of a sudden, that's all uprooted, turned upside down, and destroyed.
You said it perfectly. Yeah. And then unfortunately, in our industry now, the competition for work is really it's fierce. Like you can have a fire, and if it gets reported to the fire department, you can look out your window and have 5, 6, 7 contractors sitting outside waiting to talk to you. That doesn't work. I mean, that usually turns people off. Aggressiveness is not going to work. And then you have public adjusters that show up. You don't really have this in water damage, I don't think, but
not as much.
You have the public adjuster. I don't know if people know who those are, but they want to represent the homeowner to the insurance company for a fee. So they're going to exaggerate the loss to the point where they can get enough money to cover their fee, essentially, but they use fear. They tell them that their insurance company is not going to give them a fair shake, and fear doesn't work either. I'm just afraid that there's a lot of fear in our industry right now, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, well, hopefully standards help, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's part of
the whole idea. Yeah, exactly.
So let's kind of get a little bit deeper into the technical, and let's look at it from this vantage point. If you were to take a look at kind of the good restorers and what they know and what they do and what makes them good, what do you think are some of their secrets? What do they do that the rest of restorers do not?
It's a great case. So it's funny. I've heard this before. It's the secret is it's not a secret. It's kind of common sense. I mean, to be honest with you, it's do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it well, and don't charge too much. It's that, but trust me, a lot of people can't do that. So I guess it's a secret to them, but it's really not a secret. It's common sense, but that's the problem with common sense. It's not common, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I think, it's what besides being empathetic and being a good listener and knowing where to look for, for example, if you understand how smoke can move from one room to another, or explain why it's behind the baseboard popping out onto the floor or around the switch plate covers, squish, coming out in little strips of soot. You can probably figure out where the smoke's going to be throughout the house, and duct chases and hidden cavities and things like that. The other thing you can do, I think, which is kind of a key thing, is do something that's going to make an immediate improvement in the environmental conditions. And what I mean by that is, we can install air filtration devices with HEPA filters. We can duct them outside if we have to. It depends on the needs. We can get the furnace filters changed on the forced air systems. We can do something that's going to make them see that something's happening. Something's going to be happening. It's happening right now. We clean the floors. When fire residues cool, when the smoke cools, the stuff that falls out of the air is going to fall out on something. It's going to fall out on your horizontal surfaces primarily. It's going to impinge on walls and ceilings while it's moving through the house. But once it cools, it's going to fall. What's the biggest horizontal surface in your house? It's your floors. So I think getting in there and doing some stuff that's going to make the being in the house a little easier to be around in. And I'm not talking about fires. Some are minimal, or those stovetop fires, and some are devastating. They burn the whole roof off. There's a whole gamut.
So kind of summarizing some of that, don't overcommit.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a good lesson for us in restoration at large. When we empathize, right, with a client, I think one of the things that we want to do immediately is make them feel better as a client. And I think it's really easy to make a statement that builds an expectation that may not necessarily be realistic, and that's a recipe for disaster, right? In project failure. To mention another notable name in our industry, a gentleman named Ed Cross once told me that, we don't get sued because we do a bad job. We get sued because we have unhappy customers.
That's right.
Right. So if we overcommit and underperform, that can lead to disaster, even if you've done the job beautifully well. So that's one thing that I got from what you were sharing. The other is really, make sure that we make an impact immediately, right? Psychologically, help that individual understand that it's going to get better. How much better? Let's not overcommit, but it's going to get better, and let them see it and feel it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think what I'm also saying, Brandon, is that the technology in fire hasn't really changed that much, since its inception. I mean, the chem sponge is still the #1 tool in cleaning up after fires. It's a cellular rubber sponge. It looks like a brick, but you can see how it takes the soot off. We have the equipment's better. Sure, the equipment's better. The air filtration devices are much better than they were when we first started. Just like water. I mean, we didn't want water damage. We all had furnace blowers inside of cages. They call them squirrel cage things. I don't know if you've seen one of those or not. They're antiques now, but the equipment's come a long way, but the methodology is still the same. I mean, there is no magic bean in our industry that's you can put in a room and it's going to change the room. It's going to remove the residues. You have to get in there and remove them physically. Now, I mean, you remove them, you got to clean, you got to do some demolition, you got to do whatever you have to do, clean the air, get it out of there, give it a bath. I mean, that's literally, I mean, it sounds funny and simple, but it's not. That's the secret. Source removal. So
would you agree that fire restoration and those that are really good are those that have mastered the art of thorough and detailed cleaning?
Yes, yeah, and take pride in it, because there are no shortcuts in restoration. You can't go in there. When one of the things that Marty and I used to do was go out, and once I met him on that first job, we'd go out on many, probably dozens of those jobs, and we're looking for hidden damage. I mean, persistent smoke odor, and there's always an answer. There's a solution, because, and it's probably most of the time it was inadequate cleaning. And other times it was inadequate or insufficient use of sealers, and we'll talk about sealers a little bit later. But you can't just go in there and spray whitewash all over a house that has fire residues and expect it not to smell. You got to do, and it says so on the can. The surface must be free and clear of any kind of soiling and grease, oil, and what is soot? It's full of tars and resins. It's greasy. It's you got to clean it first. And this was a big thing for Marty, but he really, really disliked the industry's reliance on sealers.
Yeah. So let's take that just a bit deeper and launch into the next question. So what do you think is, from a fire and smoke restoration perspective, the hardest skill or process to master? And of course, I can't ask that question without following up and saying, how do you hone that skill?
Well, the cleaning of walls and ceilings isn't a rocket science thing, and nothing is. I think really the skills show up in the assessment phase. Taking a drywall saw with you and cutting some holes in some exterior walls where you suspect that smoke is infiltrated behind the drywall, and you can't see it when you walk in the room. You don't see anything, but you smell it. So you take a section of drywall out and you open it up, and it's sure enough the insulation's coal black. It's knowing where to look. And that's something that I think a lot of people that are listening and watching, I think restorers, all the experienced restorers have probably learned more from their failures than from what they've learned in classroom settings. Something doesn't work, you got to look, be creative. What's the next thing we could try? There's a lot of trial and error going on in this, particularly with odor removal. Cliff's the expert in that, but I've learned a lot from him. But there's so many things you can do, and that technology has changed. Let me tell you, it has changed over the years.
And I'll be honest and admit, for me in fire, I think part of the reason why fire never became a skill set for me, a really strong skill set. I always lent towards the water side of the equation, is just how difficult is that thorough and complete cleaning process. I think, if it's an art, to be able to completely and thoroughly remove that residue, in some cases in spaces and places that are very difficult to visually quantify. That was always a hard part for me in the fire mitigation process.
And you really have to know about what that material is underneath the fire residues. What are you working with? Is it porous? Is it semi-porous? Is it non-porous? Can you use water? Can you not use water? We try to follow the Hippocratic oath in fire. We first do no harm. We don't want to do something that's irreversible, and that's probably truer with contents than anything else, where you're taking an antique piece of furniture and you're washing it down with water, and now you turn around and the piece of furniture is 3 shades lighter. Well, you've removed 100 or 200 years worth of patina and finish on it. You can't. People count on you to know what you're doing. You really need to know what the surfaces are all about, what the vulnerabilities of those materials are, and use the right product. It's always best to use the safest, least aggressive methods that give you the satisfactory results before moving on to something a little bit more aggressive.
So John, you shared that one of the things that's really important is learning from mistakes, and that's a great segue into something I want to show to you real quickly. I told you the other day when we were prepping for this, I was going to throw something in front of you and not have you prepared for it. Right. So this is what I'm going to throw in front of you. Before I do this, though, this is my perfect time to remind everybody, if you have not yet, and I already see some questions coming in, which is wonderful, but if you have not yet entered in any specific questions around fire and smoke restoration that you want to throw at John, please put those in the chat now, especially if you've got some really specific examples you'd love for some feedback on. And I'm seeing a couple of those starting to pop into the Q&A. So take the moment now to go ahead and type those in. We're going to come to those questions in just a couple of minutes. As you're doing that, I want to take the comment here, John, about learning from your mistakes. I want to share something with you. I want to bounce this off you. This comes from a conversation I had a long time ago with a good industry friend, a gentleman named Graham Dick. As we were debating just kind of how do we learn as restorers? How do we learn to become better at what we do in the restoration industry? And this is kind of where we settled out, is that what affects your education are 2 things. Number one, just what are your abilities? What are you able to do? And what is your awareness of those abilities? I'm going to tie those 2 together here for a second. I don't want to offend anybody. So when I share the following 4 blocks of information, keep an open mind and understand that I'm talking about myself just as much as I am anybody else. I don't want to offend you with this, but let's have a really honest conversation about human nature for a second. The first is that none of us are ever perfect, right? We're all subconsciously incompetent in some way in what we do, in some way, because we're never perfect, whether it's restoring from a fire and smoke damage, water damage, or even in my case, raising 4 teenage daughters. All right, I'm subconsciously incompetent in all kinds of different ways. But what's interesting about education is that at some point something happens that makes you consciously incompetent with a particular area of your ability, right? And that could be the mistake that you're talking about, John. It could be a class that you've taken. It could be an experience with, an industry expert like a Cliff Solotnik or somebody like that just says something that just kind of shakes your world, and you realize, wait a minute, I didn't know that. I haven't been using that. I haven't been doing it that way. And all of a sudden you become conscious that you're incompetent in one way or another, right? Sounds kind of harsh, but it's true. It's exactly what happens. The education process then kicks in. And I think this is one of the mistakes that a lot of us make as human beings, is that you haven't learned it yet. When you become aware of something that you need to improve, especially something like a core skill in fire mitigation, you don't become better by becoming aware that you're not doing it today. You work towards it, right? You become consciously competent. You work towards developing that skill, developing that technical piece that you're adding into your repertoire or into your arsenal. And then as you work through becoming consciously competent, then eventually, you become subconsciously competent in that skill. And this is, to me, the cliff that a lot of us hit, where all of a sudden, we go through the cycle in business where we become well prepared, we become better at what we do, but then once we're no longer aware of where we're incompetent, we stop. And we stop the process of thinking, where else am I subconsciously incompetent? And that's the dangerous zone for me, that I look at in our industry, and the reason why the standards are so important, The engagement from industry is so important to continue to improve our standards because the industry is constantly changing, it's constantly moving. In fact, if today you knew everything there was to know about fire mitigation or water mitigation or whatever the subject area is, then stop learning. You'd be perfectly prepared for today, but you'd be perfectly antiquated tomorrow, right? That's how rapidly things are changing. So kind of the challenge I lay with this is that it's really important to kind of take a step back and recognize that this process of challenging what you know, challenging your paradigms, now being open to new processes and procedures, even those that contradict what you feel are solid pieces of the foundation that you build your skill set on, be willing and be open to accept cracks in that foundation so that you can come back and fix it, right? You've got to be willing to hear that. So with that, throwing that at you, John, I'm going to throw you this last question in the context of that. So what barriers do you think, or do you feel our industry needs to overcome or continue to grow and mature? What's the next most important thing that's going to shake our industry as it relates to fire and smoke? What do you see out on the horizon? I know you've kind of touched on a few subjects that kind of encroach on this, but I want to give you another chance to tackle it here.
Yeah, this one's difficult, Brandon, because it's such a loaded question. I think this whole program could have been about this topic. Because there's so much going on. I think that, like I said earlier, the industry needs to unify. There's too many renegades out there. I think, I've been talking about the way I was trained, hands-on with Marty, and there isn't anyone doing that anymore. There's no technical advisor. You can just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I got this situation, I don't know what to do. So you have to rely on, people that you know. Or this trial and error kind of thing. I think there's just no hands-on training going on. I wish there was. I wish I could say there was. But the barriers, I think they've already been established. I think and this is I'm really not trying to be a Debbie Downer here and get negative on you guys, but I think the insurance carriers through the TPAs, we're kind of told what we can do, what we can charge for, how much we can expect to get paid. No one seems to really care about the finished product. They're more interested in how fast it takes you to get out there and respond, and how fast you can get your estimate sent back. And there's really not enough. There's not enough interest in the quality of the work, and there's nothing to reward, performance excellence and creativity or technical expertise. That's to me, that's a barrier. It's wrong.
Got it.
It's almost like the restorers have changed their customer from the poor guy who's had a fire to the TPA.
So I'm going to use that as a segue just to drive home again. I think the importance of what the 700, the S700, the standard is going to be to industry. And I think there's a couple of good questions that came in on that. So we'll explore those and kind of get deeper into those in a moment. But let me do this. Let me go ahead and wrap out the kind of the presentation side of this. I got a couple quick things I want to cover here in closing, and then let's start attacking these questions, because we got some really good questions that have poured in. So let's do that first. So first, let me kind of round things out. First, thank you so much, John, for joining me today and allowing me to throw some of these, I know, very challenging questions as it relates to the fire industry at you. Just very, very grateful that you were willing to spend the time with us today. So thank you for that. So that'll wrap up kind of the presentation side of Technically Speaking in Fire and Smoke. We're going to go into the Q&A here in just a moment, so hang on with us as we go into Q&A. We've got some great questions to answer. But as I always wrap up with a couple of things I want to share. First and foremost, here's what's coming up next for Technically Speaking. The very next session that we're going to run is going to be more the traditional Technically Speaking, where I'm going to talk to you about hardwood floor restoration specifically. So I'm going to spend some time just drilling very, very deep into the different types of hardwood floor installations you're going to encounter, how water interacts with those different types of installations, metering strategies and monitoring, and then of course drying methodology and some of the different drying strategies you can deploy based on the type of hardwood floor that you're dealing with. It'll be a fun session. We're going to get very, very technical into hardwood floors specifically. Coming up later this year, we've got commercial water damage. I've got a great expert we've got lined up for that that'll announce at a later time, and cat response. I've got another great expert lined up for trauma and crime scene restoration. It's coming up, I think September is when we're going to roll that one out. We're also going to dig into remediation remediation and get into mold remediation, et cetera, later on this year. So we have lots of great topics coming your way. Remember, you can always catch past episodes of Technically Speaking by going to nextgearsolutions.com, click on the resources tab, restoration webinars, and you'll find all of our Technically Speaking episodes from the past, all of last year's episodes, in addition to a number of other webinars that I've hosted on very specific topics as it relates to the restoration industry. And then kind of last little announcement, save the date, January 21st to 24th in Austin, Texas, is going to be the next iteration of Interconnect, CoreLogic experience in Austin, Texas. So for those of you that joined us at CoreLogic in California this year, wonderful, wonderful to have you. And I know all of you walked away from that just absolutely raving about the experience. So join us again in Austin, Texas, January 21st through the 24th.